Welcome back to One Winning Pod, where the Ravens delivered yet another preseason victory, 21 straight, defeating the Tennessee Titans, who I still have a slight grudge against, at the bank. It was a really good time. Alec was there, myself. I was there with Chris.
Alec who?
I was just reading the notes, and I'm like, that's me. I was there with Chris and correspondent K-Fish. It was a great game, and yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. I think somebody said that they sold 64,000 tickets. There were not 64,000 people in the stands, but nevertheless, a lot of purple seats. But it's preseason. I get it. Our whole joke that whole night was basically it's preseason, you know, the players are training and they're getting in regular season shape. So are the fans, coaches, everybody. So we got time. We got time for people to come back to the bank. But yeah, it was a good game. Glad we won. It was cool, man. The first time with our season tickets was a lot of fun. I was not expecting to see my old apartment from our seats, but fun fact, I can, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, it was a good time.
Our tailgate was in preseason form. We decided we need to bring 2 cars so that we have enough room for equipment like tables and chairs. We were standing and huddling around our coolers. Not quite as elite of a setup as we may have once we take 2 cars and we have the seats down and we can really do some damage.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, like I said,
preseason form.
Preseason form. We're getting there. You know, it's like, you know, it's like we're recording on a Monday. It's like coming to work on Monday morning. You know, you're just getting in there, just like it's getting over the weekend. Got to take a little bit to get in there. Drink a cup of coffee if you're into that. Same thing at preseason, except it goes on for a month. You know, you got a whole month to deal with all that stuff. So,
well, the Ravens certainly got off to a good start, as we've been expecting from this team. And, you know, if you look at it from last year, I remember that game, we came away with it, and there was some sloppiness in that game, some turnovers, some more big plays given up by the defense than you would want, a good amount of penalties. But overall, this game felt, you know, just look at it at a high level quickly before we go into individual performances. Overall, a very solid start by the Ravens. There's definitely some things that they need to improve on, but overall, you know, a lot of promising things came out of this from some guys that we had some questions about. We saw some improvements from some guys, and yeah, this is a very good start for the Ravens.
I think the Ravens were able to get this win leaning on their defense like they have in many preseasons past, but there were some surprises, I would say, with the defense and just some of the ways we saw them play the personnel. One of the number one takeaways I had is that Pepe Williams played the whole game defensively, all 62 snaps. He played slot corner, he played safety. He found a way to stay on the field, and he made his presence known. The first possession of the game, he almost had a pick 6. Definitely, I think, was feeling that, you know, grandness of the moment, his first NFL action. Didn't quite make it, but I can confirm that at the next practice, he was at the jugs machine afterwards, and I gave him a hell yeah, Pepe, and he seemed appreciative. So he's working on it, and I think he'll get him next time.
Yeah, I tell you what, Pepe is a great example of just like what I love to see from preseason games. You know, you love to see some of these late round guys, you know, perform, you know, really well and just get excited about them. You know, I definitely would not have predicted, you know, Pepe to have a significant role on this team. I mean, sure, like a depth piece who can contribute in certain situations, and I'm not saying that he's a starter or anything by any means, but I mean, to play the whole preseason game and get snaps at corner, at safety, at returner, special teams, just like really cool. I mean, I feel like for me, it just tells me that the coaching staff has a lot of you know, trust in him, and a lot of, you know, they kind of want big things from him, and a couple other guys I'm sure we can kind of point out, but I just, you know, I think it's really cool, and it's kind of what, you know, these preseason games are all about, just finding those guys who, you know, you can get excited about, who, you know, you can kind of follow. It's you know, it's almost a little hipster saying this, but it's like you can kind of follow them and get excited about them early before everybody actually finds out that they're good, you know. So you heard it here first. Pepe becomes like a great player for this team, or like we called it, but but I kind of get that feeling.
Yeah, man, he's got that dog in him. He had that 27-yard punt return as well. I would not be surprised at all if he becomes our punt returner this year, because if I understand Duvernay was a Pro Bowler last year with his return capabilities, but if we're really leaning on him in the passing game as a number 2 receiver on this team, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they move away from him, just to like get him out of the injury zone, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And, punt returner is always a position where you can find someone more explosive. I mean, we know Duvernay made the Pro Bowl last year, but at the same time, I don't think we were ever feeling super confident every time he was back there that he was a threat to take one to the house. Of course, there's improvement there, and that's not to say Duvernay didn't do a good job at that role, because he did last year. But yeah, Pepe definitely showed a lot of athleticism in the game, knew his assignments. Really good first showing for him, and the Ravens giving him that many snaps in this game, literally every possible snap he could get. That's a good sign in the first preseason game that the coaching staff likes what they see from him early, and especially with Stevens on the mend, we could see this guy have an expanded role early in the season.
Yeah, I think with Stevens out, that led to the Pepe Williams getting all the snaps in the game. I would have expected Stevens maybe to play some safety snaps later in the game or something, so Pepe didn't have to do all that, just because he had some experience with that last year. But of course, we got to talk about Kyle Hamilton, rookie safety, has first NFL performance, and I would say it had its ups and downs. A lot of people will point out his missed tackle on Willis that could have been a sack, and instead it turned into a touchdown run by him. But honestly, the thing that really stuck out to me was the amount of ground that he was able to cover on several plays. And I think he'll correct those angles. I'm not too concerned about that long term. But I saw enough from him to think that, he has some positive game coming up.
Yeah, there was one play in particular. I'm searching my notes. I know I have the timestamp here somewhere.
Quarter 2, 8:58.
There it is. On that play, that was when Willis was taking his time out in the pocket. Pretty sure the Titans were in the red zone, moving to his right. And if you watch the All-22, I mean, Hamilton's on the exact opposite side of the field that Willis is going to rush to. And immediately once he sees that Willis is leaving the pocket, he starts his pursuit. And he closes in, and he doesn't get the tackle because Willis goes out of bounds, but he puts himself right in position to make that play. And, we know that in the draft process there were some questions about his 40 time. Certainly didn't look slow on that play. And in other plays in the game, I think we've talked about this. Other people have talked about it too. He's got game speed, and I agree with what you're saying. He'll improve on the tackling angle. And another thing we have to remember, the Ravens aren't running the defense that they're going to run in the regular season. So for most of the night, Hamilton was likely in situations that we're not going to see him in the season, especially when the Ravens are going to be playing a lot of big nickel. He was a lot more in a free safety role last night, at least from what I saw. So yeah, it's preseason. Everyone's working on things. They're not going to be finished products right out of the gate. A lot of good with Hamilton and some stuff that needs to get cleaned up.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I thought it was overall, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, there was a lot to like. Another play that I really liked from him too is I think he was more maybe a little bit closer to the box, and it was some sort of like play action play. And you saw Hamilton go back in his drops, recognize there was a guy behind him, turn, and kind of keep pace with him. And then the quarterback ended up throwing in his direction. It must have been like a deep out or something. But it was an incompletion because Hamilton was in the exact right position to be able to cover that. Those are the kind of plays that we need to see from him and, that I'm excited about. Hopefully we'll have less of, Patrick Queen being back there or whoever the playing linebacker at the time of being, maybe not recognizing the people behind them. When you have a guy like Hamilton there, like that's a natural thing for him to do. So I thought that was great. The other thing I thought I kind of noticed, and this kind of ties into our next guy, Geno Stone, is that the camaraderie for the safety group I think is awesome. When Hamilton got the fumble recovery early in the game, he and Tony Jefferson went down the end zone. They started celebrating. And then later when Geno got his interception in the game, who was there first to greet him? Hamilton and Jefferson and the rest of the guys all went down and did like the group photo kind of thing. So, I mean, that's awesome. Awesome that they have such camaraderie. It seems very clear from that position group that those guys are really close and they're building something special. So again, like that's another really great thing to see. It's a little bit of an intangible. It's not a statistic or anything that kind of tracks or anything, but it tells you a lot about, the people on this team, and you hope that builds towards something better in this season.
Yeah, the Ravens won the turnover department. They had that fumble that you mentioned that Kyle Hamilton was able to recover, Geno Stone's interception, and a Worley interception that was even earlier in the game. So that's how you win in the preseason, being able to stop these drives and get the turnovers to short fields. That's how we were able to convert and kind of, we weren't always ahead. At one point, the game was 10-7, Tennessee, but then we turned it around and took the lead and never looked back. But yeah, man, Geno Stone, this guy was a man amongst boys near the end of the game. Had no real business playing, but he had to because he's like the quote unquote, one of the worst safeties we have. But he's so good. He's had the green dot before. I'm sure he was the one calling plays back there. Just dominated. He had that one play where he blew up the seam and got the nice tackle, and obviously the pick and the recognition. He was all over the field. And he also played the personal protector role in special teams. So he has carved himself a roster spot for sure.
Yeah, Geno's going to be a great role player for this team. I know a lot of, the rumors, I guess, as far as Chuck Clark and what his availability is. We don't want to talk about that. We don't need to talk about those specifics right now. But yeah, I mean, it's very clear that the Ravens are going to have a lot of safeties this year. But I mean, Geno to me, it's just, yeah, he that drive in particular, man, he was just taking over. It seemed like every play on that drive, Geno was in perfect position to make a play. And not only that, but just he almost had a sack. He almost had an interception. Then he got the interception. I mean, he just was in the right place, right time, every single play. So yeah, I totally agree, Alec. It was he looked like he was a like an all-pro among among the scrubs or something on that drive. He was outmatching all the other guys. But I mean, that's just, again, it's just exciting because if he's our fourth, fifth safety on this team, that's a great problem to have. Geno can come in for 20% of the snaps or something this year, and if he can play in those 20% of snaps at a level somewhere close to what he showed on that drive, that's awesome. That's amazing depth to have, and it'll open up a lot of flexibility and ability to shift guys out, keep people healthy. So it's a great problem to have.
The safety group on this team, we've said it already. Others have said it already. It's going to be so much fun to watch this group once the regular season starts. It's going to give passing attacks headaches with the amount of players they have who can play at a high caliber level, the different looks they're going to be able to do with those guys. And just, I think we just got to give a lot of credit to Geno Stone too, though. This is only going to be his third year in the NFL, 7th round pick in 2020, and he's out there dominating other 7th round picks and undrafted guys. Excellent find by Eric DeCosta and the Ravens scouting department. And in some way or another, he's going to be making plays this season. Hopefully it'll be minimal because that means the group is healthy, but he's definitely going to have a role on this team this year.
I'm just so glad he didn't get away from us when he briefly was not on the roster.
That's true. I forget about that.
I mean, it's kind of tremendous that he didn't, because I want to say the Rams were the ones who picked him up, and you think they would have noticed this. I forget who got him, but yeah, he's a player, man.
I think it was Houston.
I would not be surprised.
I thought it was Houston too.
Yeah, it was Houston. Okay, so then that makes sense how he found his way back.
Yeah, Houston gave him a qualifying offer December 29th, 2020. Sorry, they picked him up on the 29th of December 2020, but did not extend him with a qualifying offer. So the Ravens got him back on March 23rd, 2021.
Man, what an oops. Probably kicking themselves.
I think they were a little busy. I don't know. It's the show about Watson, but maybe they're a little busy with him. Yeah.
Well, guys, I can't get over this. Travis Jones, all right, 3rd round pick. Jordan Davis, who is all I have to say. This man looks great. Obviously, we got to see him against the higher competition, but I am thrilled to see what he can do as a part of this defense next to Pierce. I think you got 2 nose tackles who can actually get after the quarterback, and that is something the Ravens haven't had in a very long time. This man was getting double teamed. He was playing well with the double teams, and if he wasn't getting double teamed, he was pushing and making pressures like every time consistently. I am thrilled. I can't get over it. And you have guys like Calais Campbell speaking very highly of him, and he doesn't really usually do that unless it's going to be a good player. Like we heard him say that about Odafe Owe. I know that he said it about Matabuke as well, and maybe he hasn't quite shown it yet, but we do know that he has similar athleticism. What do you guys think about Travis Jones? Can you believe that he was there in the 3rd round?
No. And Kyle Hamilton did play well, as we said. But if you asked anyone watching that game, okay, which player on the Ravens was their 1st round pick this year, I think they would have said Travis Jones. Travis Jones basically did to the Tennessee Titans backup offensive line what Derrick Henry used to do to defensive lines all the time. The man was unstoppable. He was just making man plays as a rookie in his first NFL game action. The sack that he had on Willis at the end of the second half, sure, Willis probably held the ball too long, but just what Jones was able to do, that jump he was able to get to put that move on the guard, and then the right tackle just wasn't prepared at all, and Jones's angle was good enough that he was just able to get right by them and wrap up Willis with a textbook tackle. If that doesn't get you excited about what we're going to see from this guy as a Ravens fan, I don't know what can, because that's like Travis Jones couldn't have hoped for a better play to have in his first NFL action. And it wasn't just that play. Like you're saying, all night you watched the replays. The offensive line for Tennessee was having a fit of a time trying to get this guy contained. He's going to be good, and he's going to pairing him with Pierce and Campbell and Matabuke. It's and last year we were talking about how the Ravens needed to figure out how to jumpstart the youth on this defensive line. Travis Jones alone is a huge way to jumpstart getting this unit young and solid for seasons to come. And I don't think we're overstating it after just one preseason game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add in terms of Jones, but yeah, he had a great game. A couple other guys on defensive line, like Aaron Crawford, I thought had a pretty good game. I mean, we even got to see a little bit of action from Pierce and Urban and some of those guys. I think they looked okay. Another guy I thought who really stood out, as far as making like a great like day one impact, at least in his Ravens career. He's more of a vet, but Means I think was a big impact player, at least at outside linebacker. Especially, I mean, considering just like the really lack of depth that we have in that position group right now. I mean, gosh, Owe played. I think he was in for one snap.
I'm telling you guys, he was in that one snap just to have a used sale jersey. Okay, what? Yeah. He came in for one third down pass rush, and then he's like, "All right, I'm good."
Yeah, that was a little weird. But yeah, I mean, he didn't. Obviously, he didn't play that much. Justin Houston didn't play. Ty Spauser's not playing. So you had like Dalen Hayes and Steven Means and a couple other guys who I probably couldn't name off the top of my head. It's in the notes somewhere, but I mean, Means looked great. Obviously, he's a vet. I think he's on his like seventh or eighth year or something. So he's been around
the league for a while. And I'll admit, and I'm guessing it's going to be the same for a lot of Ravens fans, I had never heard of this guy before, but he's been in the league since 2013.
Yeah, I wouldn't have recognized that. But I mean, he looked like a man who's revitalizing his career. I mean, he looked great. I feel like I feel like in hindsight, maybe it says something a little bit about just like the the lack of talent on the Titans offensive line, that we had so many guys just kind of perform really well. But I mean, nevertheless, I think Means was showing a lot of bursts. I think he was really good at chasing down the quarterback in a lot of sets. I think he just looked really good, and it looked like a player that is fighting for a roster spot on this team.
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. I did think he was a little slow in run pursuit, but again, I don't think that's what the Ravens are giving him a look at for. We know this team needs pass rush help, particularly from the edge position, and you know it's a little hard to get a gauge of like how, like you're saying, how much can we take this performance and say that this guy might be a diamond in the rough who's finally figuring out the NFL game at a late stage, or is it just the Titans were that bad? But I will say, I have not looked deeply into this guy's career, but if you just look at the overview of it, he didn't really get terribly much playing time until 2020 in his career. Bounced around Tampa, Philadelphia, out of the league in 2015 and 2019. That might have been injury related, but played almost every game for Atlanta in 2020 and 2021, and his stats were a lot higher proportionally to his career numbers in those 2 years. So now, again, Atlanta, they don't really have many defensive stars to talk about, so it could have just been, they had no one else but this guy to put in there at that position. But, for a guy who wasn't doing much in his NFL career before that to stick around, he could be a late bloomer. Maybe he's figuring something out and could be a situational pass rusher for this team, and that might be enough, to help this defense out. So he's definitely someone that I'm really intrigued, and I'm sure a lot of Ravens fans are, to see what else he does this preseason, how he plays in games 2 and 3, and how he fits into the roster crunch.
As a veteran player, I think he's a less decorated version of maybe McPhee for this Ravens team. And I definitely think, particularly with Ojabo and Tyus Bowser coming back from the Achilles injury, in the short term, he might find a way onto the roster. Maybe he gets demoted when those two guys are ready to go. But I think he'll play a part in the short term. I guess to round out the outside linebacker position, I think Dalen Hayes unfortunately didn't really show too much in this game. Not to say that he had any bad plays that stuck out, but he didn't have anything particularly exciting to point out. So didn't make the same splashes he did last preseason. So definitely looking forward to seeing more out of him in the next 2 games and trying to get a better judge of where he's at.
Yeah, I had the same observation with Hayes. There were a couple times you saw him in the backfield on pass rushing. Unfortunately, in those cases, he would get tied up with the tackle and didn't really make a strong move from my perspective to really threaten the quarterback. Didn't seem too much in run stop, but again, I might have missed something. But I mean, again, I'm trying to say, like, if to double check if I remember whether or not he was involved in these plays, and that kind of says it all, really. There, he didn't do anything bad, but also didn't do anything to make himself stand out. So hopefully for him, he's able to get it in some splash plays over the next game or 2. But that being said, he's probably, I would be really surprised if he's on the roster bubble. I think that it's really just coming down to him. He's playing to see what type of role he's going to have on this team.
Yeah, another guy I thought had a little bit of an up and down game, Malik Harrison. I think he had a couple good plays, just a couple not so good plays. I recall early on in the game, I think he had a nice kind of like recognition. I think it was like a play action pass, and he was kind of moved up, was able to drop back. He recognized it in the right way, and I think he kind of took away a passing lane and then was able to rally forward and make a tackle. Like that was a really good play, one that I would expect a year 3-4 player to make. So that was good. But in other cases, I think he had a few rushes that just didn't hit home. He gave up a bad run play. I think somebody ran right at him, and he didn't hit the right hole and kind of let the run play go right by him. overall, it's still just like we're looking for a big jump from him, and I'm not sure we've seen that yet. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I feel like a broken record just saying this, but just still a lot of up and down. We're hoping the things have kind of put together for him, but this game just didn't really look like it to me, which is a shame too, because there were a lot of other good inside linebacker play, especially from the undrafted guys. Ross in particular, I think, had a really, really strong game. We actually don't even have him on our list here, but he had a great game. And a couple other guys did as well who played in the third and fourth quarter.
Yeah, Harrison really started out with a strong game, and then just kind of faded as the night went on. Made some splash plays. The play you were talking about, Chris, where he made the pickup off the play action. I'm pretty sure it was 2 plays later. He made a really strong pass rush and hurried Willis into an incompletion on third down where if Willis had held onto the ball a split second longer, that would have been a sack. But then after that, it just wasn't very good. He had a particularly bad play where Willis stumped off the ball to Hassan Haskins, the Titans running back, in the red zone, and Harrison had an angle but wasn't able to make the tackle. It was an interesting game from him because as it started out, I remember I was watching and I was just like, oh man, he's unlocking it. He's showing what we could really use from him. But then the rest of the night just wasn't the same. So definitely going to need to see more from him. But it was encouraging at least to see the good that we saw from him, because it seemed to me to be more than what we had been seeing from him to this point. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I can believe that, and it wasn't just him. I mean, I think
certainly,
Welch,
yeah.
I think Welch also had an up and down game. There was another play, I think, just a run that he didn't take the right angle, and just the guy ran right by him, and then he got caught up in the pursuit. I think it was like a 15-yard run or something. So, I mean, he didn't have as strong of a game either, particularly in run defense. But yeah, like I was saying, Josh Ross, I thought had a really, really strong game, especially later. But it's funny, kind of as I say that too. It's the level of competition definitely a thing, right? I'm not saying at this point that Ross is a better player than either one of those guys, but he definitely looked very strong. He's a player, I think he looked very confident in no matter what he was doing. It's like if he recognized it was a run play, like he was going to make the tackle. A very strong tackler from what I saw. Or if it's a pass set, he just didn't look very confused. It looks like things, at least he seemed to recognize what was going on and then seemed very confident on it. So I would look forward a lot to see how he continues to play. He's a guy who's, among a couple other players here, McLean, Fago, I think there's a number of these guys at inside linebacker who could maybe be the fifth option there if we want, or at least a practice squad spot. But they're all kind of clustered around each other right now. So but I do think that if any one of them kind of step up a lot in these next 2 games, I think they make an interesting case for being on the roster.
All right. Well, moving on to the offensive side of the ball, the big story on offense was rookie tight end Isaiah Likely. Put on several highlight reel catches, put on some great moves in the open field. We're talking about how this team has wide receiver questions outside of Rashad Bateman and pass catching questions outside of Andrews and Bateman, if you expand it to that. But with Duvernay and Prochet out, you really only had Likely and Wallace out there as guys who we really are expecting will be guys who will command targets outside of Bateman and Andrews. And Likely certainly showed a very strong game in the receiving department against the Titans. Yes, it was soft coverage against Tennessee, but I still think you look fundamentally what he did, there's a lot there that's showing a lot of potential.
The catch he had in traffic was, that's just impressive no matter how you do it. And he should have loaded a wiggle to get the first down in his first catch. I know that there's a lot of jokes made of all the jukes that he did, and Harbs, poked some fun at him, but each one of those was, essential for him to get the first down. So I welcome it, He fought for every yard. And, for all the positives we have for him as a pass catcher, he did commit 2 penalties in run blocking. But they do seem like easy fixes. If you watch the broadcast, there was an explanation of where his hands placement was wrong. And, if he cleans that up, he'll be all right. So I hope that's true. And I hope he's able to contribute to that, because he'll need to be a well-rounded player in order to really be a threat for the Ravens and not just basically a wide receiver option.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, it was really funny. I mean, it got to a point in the game. I think it was that the outplay, I think that was second quarter or something, where he, you kind of saw him immediately get behind the linebacker, and then I remember telling you, Alec, I'm like, oh, like there it is, throw it to him right there, and he was able to bring that catch down just over the linebacker and the safety. Great play from him. It's very clear, I think, that he's a trusted target. At this point, I think we've all seen enough highlights from training camp from him enough to know that quarterbacks do trust him and they want to get him the ball. So yeah, he's definitely shown to be a weapon. But yeah, the holding penalties, you got to clean those up. I think that's the kind of the only knock on him right now. But a lot to be excited about. I think he was. I won't say by far, because I think some people were pretty excited about some other players that we'll get to. But I think in terms of the drafted rookies, I think he might have been one of the most exciting ones to watch. Another guy that, at least for me, who I was actually really excited about, that I like to talk about, is Falele. I think the big news out of camp from him is just that he had a little bit to go, and that he might not be ready, would need a lot of coaching to be able to get things up. I thought he looked great. In terms of pass blocking, I thought he looked great. Well, I was kind of expecting him to let some guys get around him, of basically not getting his depth enough or not getting hands on guys. I know that's one kind of knock for a lot of players his size, is that hey, you may not have the foot speed or be able to actually use your size to be able to knock guys away from you. I don't think he had a problem with that whatsoever. He looked great from my perspective in pass blocking. Run blocking, I think there were a few plays that he looked pretty good at. In general, I thought run blocking as a whole was a little weak. I felt like some guys were just not getting enough push up front. I mean, it's not unexpected for preseason for a lot of these young guys. They have to get used to a lot of that stuff. But I don't want to call out Falele and say he was a bad run blocker. But I thought maybe there could be some improvement there. But as a whole, I mean, I was really, really impressed. He was one of the guys who I was watching live for most of the game, and I can only point out maybe 1 or 2 plays that I thought that didn't look so good. He might have to clean it up. Most of the game, I thought he looked really solid.
Well, Falele was out there from the first possession, and was out there until the last 2 at right tackle, and I was impressed by that. I thought maybe that they would show a little bit of play for Moses, but I guess not. They're giving him the special vet treatment like they gave Zeitler. But he was out there, and I thought he did quite well as well. I would say the biggest thing with him is that he looked better out of his stance than he's been in the stadium practices or in previous film study pieces that we've done, maybe the Senior Bowl, for instance. But the funny part is, even when he was slow out of his stance, it didn't really matter because he's so big. And he was still able to dictate, contact and be able to win the rep. And that's what's super exciting about him, is because that's extremely correctable, right? A lot of the things that are wrong with Falele's game are very correctable, fundamental things that, if he puts in the effort and the time with the frame that he has and everything else, he'll be dominant. And I thought the other great thing to see was that he was able to play that many snaps and not fall off. Stamina was a concern of his, being that big of a guy, and his conditioning, where was it at? I mean, there's a lot to like about what he was able to show. I've, raised my ranks, so to speak, of him. I would say that next year he'll be our right tackle. And I think if there's something wrong with Stanley, it would not shock me if he's able to switch to the left-hand side and become serviceable there as well. But I definitely think he's the right tackle of the future, and that makes me super excited. And, we have Moses if we need to, but it looks like already they have a lot of positive signs to say that, yeah, Falele is going to take the step, and he's going to be able to be that guy, and with some more practice.
It was really exciting to see the early returns on Falele in this game. We were talking back in March with Coach, I believe it was, and we were talking about how are the Ravens going to approach the tackle position going into the offseason and free agency, going into the draft at that time. And we talked about how it was like a little bit of a logic puzzle there. Like, what do you do? Because you don't want to put too much capital towards replacing Stanley if he's going to be okay, but at the same time, you don't want to sell yourself short and make the same mistake that you made in 2021. In retrospect, right, or let's put it this way. Right now, it looks like the Ravens played the exact correct middle ground that they should have taken. They drafted a developmental right tackle with a 4th-round pick. They didn't use one of their early picks on this guy. They saw a guy who's a physical freak, a unique physical asset, who is coachable. That's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing the improvement already from the start of training camp to this point. And a guy who, I agree with what you're saying, Alec. He is a very intriguing insurance policy if something is truly wrong with Stanley. And if Stanley is fine, give this guy another season or two to work these correctable miscues that he has right now, and he'll be ready to start in the starting lineup. And best case scenario, you've got Ronnie Stanley on the left and Falele on the right. That is an excellent tackle pairing, or has the potential to be an excellent tackle pairing if that's indeed what happens. So I know there's some people who really get into the technicals of the offensive line who are a little less bullish on the guy, but it's kind of like Lamar. If you have exceptional skills or exceptional physical traits in the NFL, you're able to stick around long enough and rely on those while you're getting coached up. You can set yourself up well. And in that regard, I think Falele is a bit raw right now, but if he's able to use his massive frame and what skills he does have right now to solidify himself and give himself time to craft his game, become a more well-rounded tackle, there's a really bright future in the NFL for this guy.
I think the Ravens are starting to get it, and I think with Eric DeCosta, they're really leaning on this, is that they draft the freaks and they trust that they can coach him up, right? Like everyone was complaining, he didn't have the production. He had no sacks, but he was the fastest man alive at the combine, and he immediately started having some returns. And he has some places he can refine his game, and we know, and we have trust that he will do that. So once he gets the technicalities down of the position with his physical gifts, he'll be a stud player. And when you go in the 4th round and with your first pick up a tackle prospect who has just otherworldly size, where he makes large men look small, and, there's a chance that with our excellent pedigree of offensive line coaching, that he could become a really good player. So I'm all about this. I think there's a lot to look forward to. And that's the thing that gets me most bullish. If the people who look at it super technically are making the nitpicks, technical things can be fixed, right? It's not like he has, a frame problem or he's not strong enough. He'll have all that. So I like it. I like what I'm seeing. I think we got to move on to the other mountain of a man. The Mount
slightly smaller mountain of a man.
Yeah. We call it Mount Falele, but before it was Mount Cleveland. So, Cleveland had a pretty promising game. He had a couple pancake blocks. He had, I love how that note, it says maybe a waffle.
I'll admit, I don't 100% know if I know what technically a pancake is. So I'm like, I thought that block there was a pancake, but it might have been a waffle. I don't know. You know,
It's some kind of batter breakfast item. For sure.
he was blocking a man, and then the man was on the ground, and he was on top of him. That, to me, seems like a pancake.
Or a waffle press.
What about a panini?
Yeah, there you go.
That's not batter base, is it? No, it's just bread.
But yeah, I mean, Cleveland, unfortunately, he didn't pass the conditioning test on the first or second try to start camp. I'm sure him and this coaching staff would have loved for him to do that. But, it was a great bounce back effort from him. Run blocking, there was a lot of instances where I know he said overall the run blocking could have been better in this game, but I think Cleveland actually did have a very good game in the run blocking department. Got out on some pulls, which was good to see. And on Nate McCrary's run, his big run, Cleveland had an exceptional block on that play at the left guard position that sprung a huge hole for McCrary to run through. Phillips held his guy well too, but I think Cleveland was really the deciding block in that way. And, pass protection, this guy has gotten a knock that, that's an area he needs to improve. I didn't watch his pass protection sets as closely as others did, but what I did see, particularly in the end of the second quarter, he had some pretty good sets there where he was able to just kind of keep guys at bay, not let them get much penetration, not let them get him out of his stance. It was promising. It was, from my perspective, it looked better than what we had seen from him last season, and definitely a solid effort for him. Much needed too, I think, after the disappointment with the conditioning test.
Yeah, he had a combination block that helped spring a 6-yard run, which is one of the bigger runs of the day. Unfortunately, the line didn't get too much push when it came to run blocking. So the running backs, it was kind of hard to evaluate them. But yeah, after the first drive where Power started at right guard, Cleveland came in and he took over for the next 5 possessions. And then he flipped over to the left-hand side for 3 possessions. So he got a pretty long run in the game, almost as many snaps as Falele.
I guess the real question with Cleveland, and we'll also talk about Phillips. I guess Phillips also had a decent game at starting at guard. Is who we think after this game it's looking like is going to have the first crack at that left guard position. Sure, there's plenty more of preseason camp to come, but if there was any of those guys that took a bigger step towards that role than anyone else.
I mean, Powers is a weird one. He played right guard for just that first possession, like I said, then switched to center for 2 possessions, and then was out of the game. Mm-hmm. Don't know what they're doing there. Part of me thinks they're just trying to audition him to be able to trade him, but also give him some valuable reps at center so that, if our number 1 option, number 2 option falter for some reason, he's still there. So it's looking like, if we don't trade Powers, he'll be the backup center instead of Cologne. I mean, McCary would probably be the number 1 backup center, but just saying, like, after that, if we're going to have more positional depth. I think it was one of those things where Cleveland gained some ground, Phillips lost some ground, just because of the, correlated nature of their performances. I've heard a mixed bag when it came to evaluating Phillips. I thought he had a good pool, but, other than that, like, it seemed to me that Cleveland and the reps he had more push and more, like, domination. And the sample size is like way too small to say too much. But what I would say, and I think Chris would agree with me on this, is that when Cleveland came into the game, suddenly the run attack looked a little bit better. Because one of the first things we said on the first possession was that they weren't getting much push. And that kind of changed, it seemed, after that possession. And they were getting a little bit more push. And, Cleveland was a part of that. So, again, very small sample size. First drive versus the second drive, adjustments, etc. But it was something we noticed, and it means, to me at least, I want to keep an eye out for that in game 2.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah. I think it's a great point, though, about Powers of just, when seeing him at center was a little bit of a head scratcher. But yeah, I I don't know, at least at this point, I can't really see him as like a backup center in that role. Just because I don't think he has any other prior experience at center for that. But if that's so, maybe deal with the trade. I could see it. I mean, we had already talked about how we have seemingly all these guards and nobody has really stood out. So to kind of remove one variable from the equation when you have two other guys who could probably take the role seems reasonable. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would kind of agree, maybe Cleveland, but I also don't feel too strongly enough about my evaluation of him to say that he's got the job at this point. But I 100%, Alec, I'm with you. Sample size is a little small for me, but game 2 and 3, we'll find out a lot more about who has the leg up right now.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think going into this game, Phillips seemed like the clear front runner just because he's been with the team longer and the team knows what he can do. And Cleveland needed to show more to this point. And I think Cleveland cemented himself firmly in the role as a competition with Phillips after this game. Again, like you guys are saying, small sample size, so we'll really have to see over the next 2 games. But that's always a good thing to see when you see positive play from both guys in a competition. Yes, there were some things that both of them could have done better, could have cleaned up, but overall promising play from both those guys, which hopefully, as the Ravens like to say, iron sharpens iron. So hopefully Phillips sees that Cleveland's got his game ready to go. So that'll make him play better, and Cleveland will play better, and we'll get the best version of whichever one of those guys ends up with that starting left guard spot on week 1. I think we can move on to talk briefly about the running backs since we kind of alluded to them in our discussion with the offensive line. I don't really think there's that much to talk about with the running backs, mainly because of what you guys said. There weren't many holes for them to go through. But I will say one of the guys that did stand out a little bit to me was Justice Hill. He looked like a different back to me. He looked quicker from what I remembered the last we saw of him. I thought he made some good moves in the open field, the little opportunities that he did get for that. I noted 2 instances in pass protection where I thought he performed his assignment very well, which was good to see because I know that was something we were talking about him. His rookie year is something that he would need to improve on as someone who's a little bit of a smaller back to stick around in the league for longer than generally someone drafted at his position would. I'm intrigued with Justice Hill. I want to see more of him, and if he continues on what he showed in this preseason game, I'm wondering if he could take away the number 3 rushing role from Mike Davis when Gus Edwards comes back. I could see that happening. Wonder what your guys' thoughts were on what you saw from Justice Hill.
I got to be honest, I was surprised he was out there. I mean, he looked extremely quick. I mean, the first thing I immediately thought, I wasn't paying too close attention to the injury reports, but I would assume that he would have been a little bit behind. But I think that, after seeing his first 2 runs, I was like, no, very clearly he is healthy. He is good. He has absolutely no drop in burst whatsoever. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty surprised. I definitely think, he could have a role in this team. I think, for Mike Davis, again, I'm not sure I saw too many flashes from him, but I also don't know if I've seen enough to say that he's not the guy. I think really in my mind the only question is whether Dobbins is for sure a lock week 1, and then what's Gus's situation. I think if Dobbins is likely going to be there, I think Davis and Hill both can have spots on the team. Now for Gus, I think it's just a matter of okay, is he off? If he can get off the pup before week 1, then I think the math becomes a little bit more tricky. But yeah, I'd love to see more of Justice. Love to see better run blocking games 2 and 3. I definitely think he could be a guy who has some highlight runs next 2 games for sure.
Yeah, Hill showed good burst. He looked like he was relatively healthy. I thought that he had some good pass protection, which is really critical to see given what he's trying to do and what role he's trying to play on this team. So yeah, I mean, definitely want to keep seeing more out of him and see if he's able to stake a claim for that roster spot. I thought Mike Davis looked pretty good too, and I thought he had some pretty good vision. I'm always a little surprised by his burst. I mean, he's not like the fastest player, don't get me wrong, but again, I think just adjusted to other elder statesmen running backs we had last year, I'm like, oh look, he can actually make some moves. Beatty, he didn't have too much of a action in this game. He had a nice screenplay that he was able to gain 9 yards on. He had 2 runs that were not particularly interesting. They just, existed. So I want to see more out of this group in general. I think there's a logjam there. I think they're going to end up going with years of control, and whoever has like the most to offer as far as stability for the offense. I don't think they're looking for high ceiling with some of this. I think they look at the ceiling from Dobbins and Beatty, and whoever else makes the team is a pure floor play.
That's an interesting take, but I think I see what you're saying, and I could certainly see that being the case. Yeah, like you're saying, if you've got Dobbins doing his thing, I mean, he's a Pro Bowl talent if he's on his game 100% and fully healthy. So you've got what you've got out of him, and then you just need to make sure you've got guys who can do their role and spell him. So yeah, I definitely see that being the way they could go. And I think Hill could be that guy. I really do. We've seen flashes from him in the past. He's just never really had the opportunity to get a good amount of touches to show what he can do. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, because like I said, they did draft Beatty, so they're certainly expecting something out of him. And if you take Hill over Mike Davis, well, you're kind of losing the in between the guards bruiser that Gus is until he gets healthy. So I could see them going with Davis over Hill just from that standpoint. But I certainly think that Justice Hill looks healthy and is in a game shape that is going to give the Ravens some very hard questions of what to do with him when it comes down to the roster crunch if he continues on this path in the preseason.
Yeah, I mean, Hill also offers things in special teams. I mean, he's a player that I think adds value to a roster in the NFL. It just comes down to the question of how the Ravens are going to be able to assemble theirs and if it makes sense for him on their roster. But I think he has a future in the league regardless.
Moving on, the next position group we'll look at is the wide receiver position. Again, like we said, the expected top 3 guys on the depth chart for this position, Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, and James Prochet did not play in this game. Tylan Wallace is a guy who the Ravens drafted last year, who several are high on, the 3 of us included. He did get some snaps in this game, but didn't really get a chance to show what he could do, really. I think along the lines of Dalen Hayes, a guy who didn't do anything bad, but also didn't really get an opportunity to show terribly much, and it'll be nice to see more from him in the future preseason games this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's if he plays.
That's true.
He was in a few snaps and then, had an issue with his ankle. Just the guy kind of wrapped him up and kind of tweaked it a little bit. So, yeah, it's up to the coaching staff as if they want to play him or not. But yeah, it was certainly disappointing. I was kind of expecting a little bit more from Wallace, but hopefully his ankle's all right and he's able to come back, but not too soon. It's like we don't need him. we don't need him right now in the preseason, but it would have been exciting to kind of see him perform more. Yeah, other than that, there were a lot of, I think a lot of good plays, pockets of good plays from a couple of guys. Shamar Bridges, I think, was the big one. He had a pretty great game. It was just a trusted guy for quarterbacks to throw to. I think he ended up with a touchdown. He looked pretty great. He would be a guy that over the next couple of games, if he continues to look pretty good and stand out, I could see, it be a more realistic question of him of whether he deserves a roster spot or not.
I think Bridges is a really interesting case. The Ravens have tried and really not had much success to find a tall, big-bodied wide receiver target who can basically do what Bridges did in the preseason game. Run 9 route and get those jump balls, get the jump balls in the corner of the end zone. It's a dimension to the offense that outside of tight ends, they really haven't had. And, sure, receivers who are shorter than 6'5" or whatever Bridges is. Incidentally, if you guys watch the beginning of the broadcast, it's funny. There's a sideline shot and you see Bridges, and he must have been around a bunch of running backs and linebackers because he's just a head taller than everyone who's in the frame with him. There's 12 other people there between players and coaches. It's actually pretty funny. But yeah, I think that especially with the loss of Hollywood Brown, who was an underrated red zone threat for this team, maybe Bateman can step up and be that guy. I think we all believe he can be, and it's still a little perplexing as to why he wasn't more of a red zone threat than he was last year. But even if Bateman does step up and he's able to be a strong red zone target with Andrews, having a guy with the skill set of Bridges as a number 5 receiver who's only in there for certain packages, that could be something that could really help this team in the red zone. Having that tall athlete for defenses to contend with. Now, it was just one game. We're going to have to see how this continues during the preseason, and again, the roster crunch. But he is someone that I am keeping an eye on, and I think is intriguing going forward.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the big body receiver, I feel like Bridges showed a little bit more this game than some other guys. Like Benjamin Victor was another guy who's been around for a couple of off seasons, but I just feel like he hasn't shown the same kind of ability to go up and get it. Bridges, it seemed very clear from the catches that he had that he was not afraid to go up and just get that ball. And there's a couple other guys in that mix as well. I think Jalen Moore, is another guy who might be in there. But yeah, I mean, certainly I'm not saying he's for sure going to make the team. He could very well pan out to be another Aaron Millette, Tommy Streeter type. That could happen. That's very realistic. But it was good to see. It seems like something that he wanted to show off and kind of got the opportunities to, and it just everything worked right for him this game. But over the next 2 games, if we continue to hear his name, I think it becomes more realistic that he could have an opportunity, like you said, Peter.
One of the things to note with Bridges is that he was called into the game a little later than guys like Benjamin Victor, Mekhi Polk, and Jalen Moore. So he was playing against a little lesser competition. So I think with what he was able to show us, I would suspect that he'd be one of the first people out with the first team, quote unquote, in Arizona. I think that's the biggest thing we can take away is okay, in his tiers of bringing him out, so to speak, he deserves a little bit more time. And I can say, one practice later, I saw him with the first teams, Ooh. But, I also saw Ben Mason with the first team, so don't get too twisted, it doesn't really mean anything yet. But,
I'm twisting myself right now as we speak.
Peter is twisted. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited. I'm glad that he showed flashes. I'm glad somebody in the wide receiver crew made some flashes, right? I think Mekhi Polk was probably number 2 in that. And we just got to keep seeing more and more of it against a little bit higher competition. One of these guys is going to make the team, like we said. And we got to see if that actually continues at all with the opportunities given, which might be not that many, mattering on health, etc., in real games. Because right now, they're, like you said, they're just one of these camp darlings or one of these preseason darlings. We got to see it translate. But it'd be worse if we had no one to talk about here.
100%. And, my initial instinct after the game was to completely brush off Bridges' performance and Polk's performance as well. We can talk about Polk. He didn't have the big highlight plays that Bridges did, but he did a lot of little things really nice. Made a one-handed catch along the sideline early in the second half. Had a small screenplay. Really solid game from Polk as well, too. And, I really wanted to brush off because we, Chris was saying, Streeter, he was a preseason darling for the Ravens back in, 2016 or whatever. I remember in middle school, my dad and I were super high on Randy Himes because he would go in 2004 and 2005 and just dominate in the preseason and do nothing in the regular season. But, maybe the Ravens will be able to find one of these guys one day. Other teams are able to do this, not often, but, there are cases of teams finding late round free agent wide receivers and them turning into at least a solid contributor with a set role in an offense. So I will say, track record with what the Ravens have been able to do with finding this talent at the wide receiver position from the undrafted players is way behind where they're able to in pretty much every other position. But that being said, it could happen. I'm not going to write it off completely yet, but I agree. It's not likely that either of these two guys develop into something who's going to be a key cog in this offense, or even a role player in this offense. But there's a possibility.
I think it was nice to see that Anthony Brown was able to provide quality passes to the wide receivers and the playmakers in order to evaluate them. That was one thing I was a little concerned about was, these backup quarterbacks after Huntley, are they able to give us solid reps so that we can really make evaluations of the talent? And I felt like, they all did that. So that was positive as well, just from the quarterback perspective. I don't suspect any of these guys making the team, but hopefully they're able to keep them around in the practice squad.
I agree with that, and I think that's about as much analysis as we need to give for that.
All right. I think with that, we're going to move on to the special teams, which I thought was pretty interesting. Stout came in and was able to, do punt things. He also took some kickoff duties, which I thought was fascinating because he had two different approaches. One of them was a traditional approach, like you see out of any other kicker, and the other was like a 3-step back, little blast off kick. They had some decent hang time and landed between the 5 and the end zone. And I guess he was just trying both out. It was very interesting to watch.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys had heard anything. Is there talk of maybe Stout taking over kickoff duties for Tucker, maybe to save his leg? Or is that just see what the guy can do, just in case for whatever reason we would need him to do that in a game?
I think it's a little bit of both. If we recall back to Stover's end of career, that was something they did. And, Tucker's not even remotely at end of career. But if you suspect that Stout's going to be the kicker of the next 15 years, then yeah, there's probably going to be a crossover point where maybe Tucker isn't kicking off anymore and they just let Stout do it. So I think it was one of those things just to give him some experience. Stout's kicked the ball off Tucker's kicked the ball off a million times. He has no need to have to do that in an NFL preseason game. So let Stout do it, get some experience, and go from there.
That's true. That makes way more sense. I was just overthinking it, but
well,
anyways.
And also I would say I would thought maybe Stout might kick a field goal, but obviously they were more interested maybe in him getting more reps as a holder. So the ball was held and the ball went through the upright. So no complaints from my end. I am not going to be good enough and claim that I'm good enough to say oh, that was a good one or a bad one. I mean. Oh, yeah, when you saw it with bad holds and with a larger sample size of a season, maybe we'll have a better idea. But so far, reliable and looked like it was right. Yeah.
I mean, I don't see a need that we need to have Stout kick field goals. I mean, we're not shopping him, so, we're not trying to flip him for a 5th-round pick. So,
Please, he was a 4th-round pick. He's at least a 3rd or a 2nd.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. We need more of a return. Who needs a kicker and who's willing to spend that high draft capital? Cleveland isn't, because they don't have one. But yeah, I mean, it was cool to see. Very versatile. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how this guy progresses. But I hate to do this because it's not Ravens talk or anything. But Stout's my guy, man. It just. I think we saw a lot of good things, a lot of versatility from him. Everybody's fawning over Arazia and his 82-yard punt, which is not an 82-yard punt. It was a touchback, so it was only 62. He's got a big leg and everything, man, but just okay, whatever. I don't know. We've had this conversation before of just, it doesn't really matter if you can kick it out of the stadium. If it's a touchback, it's a touchback. Doesn't help field position. Obviously, we didn't see Stout consistently pin teams back, on the 5 or anything. It wasn't like, amazing kicks, but I think he's got more than enough power. The fact that he can do kickoffs, I think, shows that he's got more than enough power. I think he's going to be good. I think he's everything that you could expect from a rookie punter.
Yeah, I mean, from a punting perspective, which I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on, but it seemed to me like he had a solid game. Technically, it was 4 punts by the box score, but 5 punts in actuality. His very first punt was there was a penalty that was called back, and he had to repunt. But all of them ended up with the offense starting somewhere between the 16 and the 24-yard line. And he was punting all those punts from various depths. I don't have in the notes where the punt was from, but that's what you want from your punter. He went out there, he punted the ball well. On the last punt, I know the announcers were saying that they, from their perspective, he was trying to do a corner punt, kind of pin that one inside the 10. Didn't work out. It's preseason. He might have been working on a punt technique that he's less skilled on at the current moment. But yeah, again, I'm not going to sit here and say like I can say for certain he had a great game, but from my perspective, it looked like a very solid outing. Certainly something that the Ravens should feel comfortable with in the field position battle if he continues to go along that path in the regular season.
I'd say not to go unnoticed. The Ravens are silently trying to create the most attractive special teams unit. I got a lot of comments about Stout's looks. And I mean, Nick Moore, I pulled him up. He's not too bad himself. Obviously, Tucker has been swooning over the Ravens watching public for years. So I'm just putting it out there. Maybe the NFL's best looking special teams unit.
We certainly know how that'll contribute to on the field performance.
And this is what you guys get if you've listened for this long, the true hard-hitting analysis.
No one's going to block Stout's kicks. They're going to be like looking at those luscious locks and being like, damn, dude, what conditioner do you use?
Oh, man. So is he going to replace Troy Polamalu in the
head and shoulders?
Never not working.
Oh, man. I had to throw in a little bit of comedy at the end there. Guys, it was a great time talking about this preseason game. I really enjoyed it. And, big preseason game coming up. The NFL afforded the Ravens the opportunity to go to Arizona and pregame what will be the Super Bowl destination for them later in the season. Can't understate that. Figure out the places to sleep and to eat and hang out. So, good stuff. Thank you, NFL. We'll be back to analyze that after that Saturday game. You can find us on Twitter, OneWinningPod. You can also email us, onewinningpod@gmail.com. We appreciate you guys interacting with us and talking to us and listening to the show. Go Ravens.